Welcome back to the More Than Mothering podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Hardstuff from the Gentle Counsellor, and I specialise in perinatal mental health and parenting support. In today's episode, I am joined with a guest who is Dee from Mama Nourished Co, and we are talking about the importance of postpartum preparation. Before you listen to this episode, I want to tell you all about an amazing group that we have actually just started from having this conversation today, and that is a Facebook group called Practical Postpartum Village Australia. You are welcome to join, and I'll link it down below. This group is for those of us who are looking for a community to support us, and this can be in practical ways such as meal trains, cleaning, or child caring, for anyone who needs to build their postpartum community. I hope you enjoy this chat today. It's full of great tips, so make sure you're taking notes and send this to anyone who may be pregnant. Well, I'm being joined today on the More Than Mothering podcast with Dee Palmer from Mama Nourished Co, and we're going to be talking all about the importance of postpartum preparation. I'm really excited for this conversation, and I have a feeling a lot of people listening or watching this podcast right now are going to be intrigued to hear what you have to say, Dee. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I love talking all about the postpartum period, so I'm very excited to be here with you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be a guest today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, of course.
Would you like to start by telling everyone listening a bit about yourself and what you do and why you do it?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Dee. I am a wife and a mama of two. I have two toddlers now, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So it is chaos in our house. I'm a postpartum doula. I graduated my course in, when was it? 2020. So it all began with the lockdown and the beginning of the pandemic in March of that year. And I just thought I had the time, I was stood down from my job in my retail position at work, and I had all these ideas flowing because I had all this extra time while my son napped and I was at home. And I thought I can do something here, and little idea became big idea, and then it became a business, and then it became a qualification, and here I am. So
wow.
I run Mama Nourished Co, and I started taking on in-home clients at the beginning of December. So I'm pretty fresh, but the business is almost a year old, and it's amazing. I love what I do.
Yeah, that's so amazing. And what a time to get started right at the peak of when everything hit.
Yeah, I think when we needed it most, a lot of doulas actually came out and started qualifying and getting their certifications.
Yeah.
Because they might have only just had their own babies and realized, oh my goodness, all these women now have to do it completely alone. So
totally. That's been one of my biggest concerns as well, is realizing the impact this has had for so many not just first-time parents, like anyone having a child and feeling very isolated in this postpartum period is very concerning.
Yeah.
Like I really do worry about the implications it's had. I mean, I'm talking to people often about how it has been for them too.
Yeah. And it's not funny. I think there's positives and negatives to the lockdowns and the isolation periods. And I think one of the positives is that new parents get to really enjoy that time with their new babies and get to spend a lot of one-on-one time with them. Whereas sometimes, especially culturally, that could impact it as well. You might have a lot of people around. You might have lots of people around you in the hospital as soon as you give birth, know. And this period of time has really given us as mothers and fathers that opportunity to sit back and just be with our babies, which is beautiful. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum is that lacking of support from our medical practitioners and our, even accessing services like women's health physios, IBCLCs, the Australian Breastfeeding Association face-to-face classes that we might do during pregnancy. A lot of these really, really important and significant milestones that we reach during pregnancy and our postpartum we're missing out on. And I think that's negatively impacting a few things as well. So I'm kind of 50-50 on.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it, is that like both of those things can exist at the same time. I don't think it would be healthy to be like completely positive or completely negative about it. Because I have had clients reflect to me that it was nice having their partner home because they were working from home or whatever happened. They were like, that was nice having that because that was different to like another experience that they had or what they were expecting to happen. And then on the flip side of that, like again, with the not so great side is I know that even like in like the mental health services, there's huge wait lists for people to access care because so many people have been demanding of that of the system, like mostly like we're talking about the isolation and just, you know, the collective trauma in general that a lot of people are experiencing. So it's definitely been really tricky. And I've heard a few sad stories as well of what the experience has been like for people, whether they weren't allowed to have even their partner in hospital with them or like families not even getting to meet their children at that baby stage. And now they're meeting them as toddlers, or we're moving into like older than that now because it's going on 3 years soon as well.
Which is wild to think about, that
I know
this has all been going on for so long and it's our new normal. You know,
it is.
It's crazy. But one of the things that I think about too is like, you know, with my first born, so we had him in 2019, I was isolated from my family because we lived in Darwin and everyone that we love is in Sydney. And I really threw myself deep into mothers groups and activities for him. And every single day of the week, while my husband was at work, I made sure that we had something to attend. And because I'm quite a gregarious person, naturally that just worked for me. And last year, I didn't have any of that. So for me, I struggled with that isolation, being at home with 2 kids when my oldest wasn't at daycare, having that constant need of attention from me 24/7 and breastfeeding a baby, you know, that's really tough. So any parents that have just made it through the day during this last couple of years, I salute you, because it has been a really rough run.
It has been rough. I cannot even imagine how it's looked like for everyone, because I know even when I had my second, I know how much I relied on having daycare to have my toddler go to still. So I had a few days, you know, just with the baby or whatever needed to be done. And it's just, it's definitely been survival mode for a lot of people. And I think now we're getting to that point where, because for some of us, especially for those in Australia, like our restrictions are changing or easing. And so I feel like people are coming out and realizing like, wow, that's actually what happened to me. And now we're trying to process it and talk about it. So now is a very crucial time where people are going to finally allow themselves to feel more vulnerable to what they've experienced.
I think there's also, you know, it's that strange time where people have just had babies. They've never had a baby before. And they can't differentiate between whether or not they're suffering postnatal mental health concerns or if they're suffering mental health concerns because of the pandemic.
Totally.
And who is the person to tell you what's affecting your mental health? Like, no one is going to be able to delineate between the two. So that would be a real struggle for women.
And that's important for us who work with these families to have that understanding as well, to realize, don't be so trigger happy to diagnose one way or the other. Not that we're diagnosing anyway in our professions, but, you know, to keep that in mind, that even with thinking that way, it's a very understandable and reasonable response. Whether it is pandemic related or new parent related, it makes sense that people would be having certain mental health struggles with it.
Definitely.
So in your line of work with this, can you talk to us a bit about the importance of postpartum preparation, as in why is it important? And then perhaps we can talk about some of the ways to support ourselves and making sure that we are prepared for postpartum.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess coming from my own experience, I know a lot of women do this. We plan for the birth and that's the end of the pregnancy. And then we have a beautiful baby and we're good to go. But actually, in reality, as we all know, once you bring that baby home, a lot of things change. So your relationship changes, your identity changes as a woman, even as a man, your identity changes. And there's a lot of pressures and needs on the dad as well, but we'll stick with the conversation around the woman right now. You know, things like your nutrient intake and your calorie intake needs to change. Things that you don't ever imagine impacting you make such a huge difference. Your hormones experience that massive drop. Your baby is going back and forth, left and right every second day, and it's hard to navigate what to do next. So I guess for me, the really important reason that we need to put a plan in place for our postpartum is because of that unpredictability. So if we're doing things like, you know, we're setting boundaries with visitors, for example, that's a really big one for me. And I'll go into that a little bit more in a second, but I have 4 pillars of care that I like to discuss with new mums. So we've got nutrition, support, rest, and warmth. And those 4 things are a combination of traditional Ayurvedic and Chinese postpartum practices that are now being welcomed a little bit more into the Western world, which is amazing. So when we talk about rest, for example, a lot of us go into our postpartum period just full force, and we're on our feet and we're trying to do things back to how we were doing things before we had a baby. And the example that I always talk about is 4 days postpartum with my son. I was lugging a 10-kilo pram into my SUV to go to the cafe and meet my girlfriend. And I think part of that for me was feeling a bit more like myself again. Because when I'm pregnant, I get very sick and I almost have hyperemesis. So I think when I don't have that illness, my body just thinks, you're good as gold, like do whatever you want, you're capable of anything. And then it got to a few months later and I started running again, I'm talking 4 months postpartum. And then I nearly ended up with a prolapse. And I said to my husband, I feel like I've got some that dragging or that heavy feeling. And he had no idea what I was talking about, of course. But I said to him, I just have to be a bit mindful. And then I think I better stop running. But I kept going because that's the sort of control freak I am. And then 2 days later, I hurt my knee and I couldn't run.
Oh, wow.
And I haven't run since. And I think that was what I needed to put me into place.
Forced you.
You need to slow down and just take it easy and look after your body, and then you can, you know, do those other things later on. So yeah, that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And that's a boundary for yourself, right?
Yes.
Setting those important boundaries for yourself. So when I talk about setting boundaries in particular, that's something that we can do ahead of time during our pregnancy. Start doing that early to ensure that we give ourselves the best opportunity to rest and recover and eat the proper foods and stay warm and receive support. So I have a few ideas on that on my Instagram, but I like to suggest things like not having any visitors for the first week or 2, limiting visits by, it doesn't matter who it is, to only an hour, especially for people who aren't naturally going to come into your home and help you. Because really you should only be having people within your home that are going to just, you know, look at the bench and say that there's some dishes to be done and just do it without
you saying anything.
That's right.
Totally.
You shouldn't need to be hosting people in your first 6 weeks. That's ridiculous. But there is an expectation of us as women that we would do that sort of thing naturally.
To perform and show off the baby and divulge everything. Yeah.
That's right. And one of my beautiful clients said to me last week, you know, she's just had her baby and she said, I haven't heard from any of my friends after I had the baby, and no one asked me how I was. They all said, when can I come and meet the baby? And that's not okay. Like, we shouldn't have that heaviness on us after we've just given birth, especially when we have other children to look after as well. Like, we need to rely on our village. So that's the reason setting boundaries is so important to me. And then we think about things too, like, you know, asking for help. So doing that in little stages during pregnancy, because we know that that's a very big thing to ask for help as women and as mothers. And so one way I would suggest starting that is like during pregnancy, if you're having people around, just ask them to pick you up something from the grocery store. You might not need it, but getting into the habit of doing that.
That's such a good tip, because I was just thinking how in my personal experience between my two, how the second time around, I was a bit more blatant to people saying, please come over and bring food and clean my house, because I didn't have that the first time and it really sucked. It didn't happen still for me. And I'm wondering if with that extra tip you've just given there, for anyone else that may also be able to relate to my experience, is it's almost like giving that pre-training maybe to yourself to ask in a particular way that works. Because sometimes we think we're asking, but it's actually not translating properly enough. And then, like you said as well, also that would help those people do it and either show us that they can or they cannot do it. And then you also can pick, okay, who is actually going to be a support person, who isn't, who has shown me that they can do that for me happily, and I didn't feel bad about it, or I didn't feel awkward when I asked, or who did it without me even asking.
And it shapes that visitor network really easily for you if you start doing it early. And even before you have kids, you know, if you know that in a year, 2 years, you want to start trying for a family, well, now's a good time to put the feelers out. See what those family members are going to do. You know, they're all about the baby, but see what they're really going to do for you, because that will really support your mental health. And one thing I like to do for my clients is I have some printouts which have different lists on them. So one of the lists is like favorite snacks, meals, and beverages, and you fill that out and put it on your fridge. And it's just so easy because people can see it. Like you say to your partner, can you get me something to eat? He sees that it's lunchtime, or she sees that it's lunchtime, and then they can just look at the list and you don't have to make any decisions.
What a great idea. I feel like that one just in itself is life-changing.
Yes. But the trick is to actually fill it out, because I know a lot of people don't want to fill it out feeling like passive aggressive.
Yeah, I also noticed that if you're receiving that information on a day when you're already tired and you're like low energy, that's not the day to do this. But most of us tend to have the cycle of energy where we have those days where we have high energy and we want to get everything done. We want to cook and clean and do everything. Make sure on those days is when you're taking advantage of planning and preparing in this sort of way.
Yeah. And definitely, of course, one of the biggest things we can do for ourselves postpartum that will happen regardless of the outcome of our birth or the health of us or our baby is to prepare food and get things in place to ensure that you can eat good food that have enough carbohydrates, enough fats, enough protein, enough fiber for you when you're recovering from birth. Because there's a big misconception, I think, around like breastfeeding and bottle feeding, and that the mothers need there's a big difference between their nutrient needs. But really, if you look at it as a baseline, when we're all recovering from birth, regardless if it's cesarean or vaginal birth, we're recovering. There's torn tissue, there's blood loss, there's fluid loss through sweating and amniotic fluid and everything else that goes on. We need to make sure that we're eating food to sustain us.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I've only ever heard about people making a point of saying, you know, breastfeeding moms need an additional 500 calories a day. I have never heard anyone voice similar concern around like every mom, like every person who has given birth should be like caring for themselves nutritionally as well, or being cared for nutritionally, I should say. So stock up your freezer, stock up your fridge, stock up your pantry, put lots of one-handed snacks in the freezer, because you will never know how many you need. One-handed meals. Whenever I see people say, meal prep, and I always like to add my bit, one-handed meal prep. My go-to was like soup, because I'm like, that ticks all the boxes. That's like the chicken and the veggies and the delicious, you know, buttered toast that you have to dip it in or whatever. That was a big one I had in my postpartum. That was so easy for me to just heat up and one-handed meal.
Yeah, it's perfect. And you can add, like, you can make your own chicken broth, which is really cheap and easy to do. And then it adds that extra layer of nutrients.
Yeah.
And like good, healthy fats to keep you really full as well, because you get so hungry when you're breastfeeding or running around after other children, because you can't always sit down. But if you're feeding yourself, or you've got people bringing food to you, in whatever capacity that is, which I can elaborate on, you know that at least you'll have the right energy to get on with your day. So a meal train's very important postpartum.
I've only just heard about this before. Can you explain what a meal train is, in case anyone else was like me and had no idea that it was a thing?
Yeah, so there's actually a website called mealtrain.com, very complicated. It's a free resource. You can go on there and create like your own personalized looking meal train. If you have a doula or like a birth worker, they'll do that for you. I do that for my clients as well. There's always some pushback because people don't like to ask for help. But it's now a non-negotiable of mine. So when a new family has a new baby or babies, they will get a meal train link, and I will keep checking that they're sending it out.
Great.
So you just send it. You can like email it to a network of friends. You can pop it in like your messenger chat. You can just add it onto your, what's called, like your Facebook page or your Instagram stories.
Yeah.
And they just click in there.
Yeah.
They select a date and write down a meal. That's it.
So good.
And then they drop it at your door.
Yeah. Wow. I've seen it in action. I have yet to be included on one. But I look forward to the day where I can be on the meal train for someone else, because I think it's such a great idea. And I do think it's really interesting how many of us can relate to that notion of feeling bad, of asking for help. And the way I like to flip this with the mindset shift for clients that talk about that is we need to remember that we should let people love us.
Yes.
People want to help us, and they want to love on us, and they want, most of them, especially if you're surrounded by good people in your life, they want to be able to help. Like, I know I have that strong drive. Whenever any of my friends or people I know have had a baby, I'm like, I know all these things. I'm like picking up the vacuum without even asking.
Yeah.
And so it's like, there are people that feel like you. Like, if you're like me and you're sitting there going, I want to do this for someone, or I have done this to someone, then let people show you as well that they want to do that for you as well.
Yes. Yeah. It's so important. And that it makes them feel good to help. And it's a nice way for them to be able to help. Exactly. Yep. It's a good gift to give people food when they've just had a baby, because it hits all the boxes.
Yeah. And we've got the ease now. If you're in an area that has like Uber Eats, I mean, it could not be easier as well for some. Yeah.
And I say too, like, because some people will say to me, oh, I'm not a very good cook, or I'm not confident in the kitchen. And I'm like, find out their favorite restaurant, let them know a day, and you can send them a meal cooked for them by their favorite restaurant. Like, that's so easy. Yeah. $50-$60, and you've given them the best baby gift they could probably ask for.
So true, because we are definitely have an emotional attachment to food, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. You're allowed to enjoy food, and food is a very sociable thing as well. It's a time where we gather at the dinner table together as a family, or maybe that's the one time the parents can actually sit down and have a conversation together and enjoy some good food. And it's just nourishing, or it's something to look forward to in your day, especially if you're sleep deprived or whatever it might be. And like you said, you just are so hungry. It's just like the one thing you can rely on. I remember getting so excited when I could have like an Uber Eats delivery come during nap time, and it was like the perfect time when the baby finally was asleep, and I was like, this is the greatest thing ever. I'm living my best life.
And when my son stopped napping, I think it was like just after 2 years old, there was no more Uber Eats lunches because I didn't want to share with him. So now I wait till he's
That's such a good point.
I'm not having him steal my food, so it happens at other times.
Maybe save the meal train for after the partner has gone back to work, is what I'm starting to think now.
Yep.
For those solo parenting days.
Yes. Yeah. And like, if you can put an esky at your door, people don't even have to ring the doorbell.
That is so great.
Yep. It's the best. And like, that is no effort required at all for someone, even a partner, to put their esky at the door and then collect the food when the people bring it by.
That is so great. Do you, this question has quickly popped into my mind, so sorry if I'm throwing you off or if you've not had it, but do you feel like people also struggle with like an age limit on when they're allowed to keep asking or expecting help?
Yes, definitely. Once they get to that like 6-week mark or that 3-month mark, women just, it's like something switches in their brain and they're like, oh, well, I don't have a newborn anymore. My baby is a baby and I should know what I'm doing and I should be able to do all of this. But within my packages that I offer my clients, I often say to them, save some of your hours within your package and use that for when the baby's sleep regression hits, that first sleep regression.
Yeah, I feel like 4 months has been a really challenging time with both of mine. That's when I really felt like I was losing my mind a bit.
Me too. Yeah. And for me, like, I didn't experience baby blues with my son, my firstborn, but around that 4 months mark, when I was just persisting on getting him to sleep in his cot, that really took a turn for me. And I said to my husband, I had a really bad night, and I said to him the next day, I actually think I might have postnatal depression because I am not coping. And then he said, it was 5 a.m. at this point, and he goes, don't worry, I'll take the baby for a few hours, get some sleep, and then we'll talk about it when you wake up. So we did that, and I was like, I feel okay now. But with my daughter, I'd actually put all these beautiful plans in place. I was going to have 2 weeks of rest, no visitors, on my bed, and just be fully lapping up this newborn life with my husband looking after my son and me just feeding the baby and eating in my bedroom. She ended up in special care. So she was okay. She just had some like difficulty breathing, and being in special care helped her a lot. But she was in there for 10 days and I was just running back and forth to the hospital. At the beginning, the first couple of days, it was 3 times a day. So it was a half an hour trip to the hospital. And then I was pumping because I was breastfeeding. So it was every 3 hours. And then I had to come home and prepare dinner for the night if we'd run out of food in the fridge, or I didn't take anything out of the freezer. And then my husband, of course, was busy trying to distract my son because we'd never been apart at this point. So all these things that I had to do completely just threw my rest period out the window. But the importance of my postpartum planning was that I did have the food to eat. I organized the support beforehand. So I knew my 2 sisters lived close by. They would be able to come and help me with our older son while I was at the hospital if both of us wanted to go. They would often come over during nap time. So we'd put him down for his nap, rush off to the hospital for a few hours, and they'd, just stay in the house, do the dishes, do a few things for me while they were here. And then we'd be back for his dinner time. And that worked really well. So if I hadn't have put that plan in place, we would have been up shit creek, And they brought meals for me. I utilized the other family members who weren't necessarily handy in the kitchen to get things for me from the shops. So instead of spending my time between nursery visits at baby bunting, I'd send my sisters.
Right. Yeah.
So, and that was really great. And they were happy to do that because that was the only, they knew that they couldn't help me emotionally.
Yeah, because they can feel very helpless. And so sometimes practical things gives them something to do and it makes them feel like, okay, I'm doing something here.
Yes. And like one of the things that I did was organize a belly support band because I was running around so much.
Oh, right.
Good tip if you have older children and you should do it really anytime you have a baby, but holding you in from underneath your bra strap to the top of your hips, it just keeps everything nice and secure. It reduces the risk of prolapse. It stops your back pain. I think once you've had the baby, you kind of don't realize how loose everything can feel. So having that support physically is really important as well.
Yeah. I remember being surprised at how weird it felt. I think there was like one day where maybe I was bending over and like tying my shoes or something. And I was
Oh
like, this
yeah.
feels so weird. Like I just
Yeah.
wasn't prepared to notice how odd my body felt, like
Mm.
especially my stomach area. I was like, things I can tell are not where they should be.
Yes. Yeah. And it's like an empty, like windy sort of
Yeah,
feeling. It's
I don't even know how to
strange.
describe it. It was just really
Mm.
bizarre. And then with my second, I was a bit more prepared for that feeling. But my first, it really shocked me. And I don't know what I was expecting, probably the unrealistic version of people, the whole bounce back thing, which is another
Mm.
conversation in itself.
Mm.
Um, there was a few things I was thinking as you were talking about support, because often what I hear about is from people who don't have support around them, whether that's and I mean, most of the time it's by choice. Like they have
Mm.
family members that they don't get along with or that they don't want around their child.
Mm.
Um, or even if they're like a single parent and so there is no partner. So do you have any experience or advice for those kind of dynamics?
Mm. So I actually have personal experience with that. There were, oh, I don't think those people are going to listen to this podcast, so that's good. But there are certain people within my family that I just didn't really feel that would be a positive vibe to have around at that time. And I would have organized a postpartum doula for myself if I hadn't have been a doula. I knew what I needed to plan for myself, and I had that benefit. But I think if people are in that situation where they can't or don't want to have family or friends around for whatever reason, doulas, cleaners, people who can cook for you. So there's lots of postpartum specific meal services now. I have one within my own business, and there's lots and lots around Australia. I'm going to make a post about that actually quite soon, just to connect everyone. But those sorts of things, if you can outsource them, please do, because it will just take such pressure off you when you need it the most. And a lot of these places might not advertise that they have payment plans available, but if you reach out to them, the most important thing to people like me is that our clients get the support that they deserve.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Yeah, you just ask the question. You never know what someone might say.
Yeah, and some businesses like myself even have sliding scale.
Yes.
So it's always worth asking.
Yes.
Like human to human, it's worth asking.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking as you were talking then, because I was wondering about this myself, and I was like, I wonder if we could create this sort of community where it is like bringing strangers together. Because ironically, a lot of my friends are strangers I've met on the internet, which we were all told not to do, you know? And so I was like thinking, if I saw a post of a mum in my local area that was like, I am struggling, I'd be like, what do you need? I'm there. Like, I'm bringing over dinner. So dinner sorted. And I would not know who this person is. And I cannot be the only one thinking that. And I feel like either surely someone's already done this and has created some sort of community, or if you were to look on Facebook or reach out to anyone, even if it's like an influencer on Instagram, I am sure that there are people that would be more than willing to help you out or point you in the right direction or find you that community you need. And if there isn't, then perhaps that is worth looking into a bit more. Because I really feel like we're at this turning point where people are realizing that whole notion of it takes a village to raise a child. We're kind of like, okay, so what about the mum? Like, where's the village for the mum? Let's be that. Let's be that.
You're so right. I was talking to someone this morning about that exact concept. You know, baby's born and mum's forgotten. Like, no, that's unacceptable. It shouldn't be that way. The new mother needs to be held as much, if not more, than the new baby. We can't forget about the older children because they're experiencing a massive shift, as we both know. When you introduce the second baby into the home, it is just that first child, it rocks their world like they'll never know. And I just don't understand why we just forget that the mother is there, you know. And I've even had phone calls myself during pregnancy and early postpartum, and they're like, how's the baby? Yeah, the baby's good. Like the baby's just sleeping in 3-hour chunks at the moment, being a regular newborn, and then deciding to sleep for 5 minutes at a time. Like baby's fine, but how am I? And don't bring me another onesie because I don't want it.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you, you know, these sorts of things. The good thing is that the fourth trimester, first 40 days, first 6 weeks, you know, the golden months, these concepts are aligned and they all mean a very similar thing. And I think most women who are having babies now are starting to hear about one or two of those things and understand the importance of postpartum. But we have a long way to go.
Yeah. We're no longer suffering in silence, and we just need to really keep raising our voices on it, to be honest, because I've also had conversations where I've somewhat apologized to people in my life or family who had children before me, and I didn't realize. So it's also that learning curve of, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize how hard that was for you until I went through it. But I also think even though you can't go back in time and change it, there's still some healing that can come from that as well. And of course, self-reflection is always important. Positive change, you don't get to have a different choice unless you reflect on it and you can see that and have awareness for it as well.
You're right. And my sister had a baby before me, 1 year before us, and she always says to me, because I don't eat meat or cook meat for my client, like beef and red meats within that first week in particular of postpartum. And she goes, you cooked me a roast beef 3 days after I had a baby. What were you thinking? And I said, I didn't know. Like people don't know. And that's why roles like mine exist, to help that education and change that mindset. And the reason that we do that, by the way, is to be really gentle and kind to the digestive system as everything starts to come back to normal. So after like a week or two, you can start to digest those things a little bit easier if you're slow cooking.
How interesting. I can't wait to go and find your Instagram and look at all these informational posts that you have, because I feel like I'm going to do a deep dive now, because it's something that I'm aware of as we are having conversations around, do we have another one? And I know that my postpartum is going to look very different. Very different.
It's very different the second and third time, I think.
I don't think I'll have a birth plan. I'm going to have a postpartum plan.
That's good.
I mean, I will have both still, but really you just realize like which is really important and which one actually goes for longer and involves both of us, not just one. So it's having that mindset shift, I think, is a really hard point too, because it can dredge up stuff for you. Like it can dredge up uncomfortable feelings or sadness or resentment when you reflect on, I didn't have that. I'm not too happy about that. So what is kind of your advice for people who may be in that headspace, especially with their partner, if they feel like their partner isn't stepping up and doing their share or isn't cooking the meals, for example, and the person that gave birth is still expected to cook dinner, for example?
I would say then utilize your village, you know. So there's always local community groups on Facebook now, suburb groups, home birth groups, even like the smaller mothers group. Utilize your village and reach out to them, because 100% they will step up for you while you have that conversation with your partner. And as hard as it is, you need to have a conversation. And again, this is something that we need to be discussing during pregnancy, not leaving it to the postpartum. There's a lot of things, I think, in terms of relationships that we need to discuss early on. You know, like the financial situation, what's the expectation there, what's going to happen with baby sleep, you know, if we're going to co-sleep, if both partners are open and willing to discuss that.
What does it actually look like the harsh realities of not sunshines and rainbows.
That's right. You might not have sex for a year, you know, that sort of thing, or longer. Things like putting that list on the fridge, doing that early. And then there's another list I have, which is like chores around the house. So setting the expectation, that's one I heard from Naomi Chrysolakis, who is a postpartum doula in the Sutherland Shire, down like in Wollongong. She said, before I had my second baby, I set an expectation with my husband that he would put on a load of washing the night before we go to bed, and then in the morning he would hang it out for me. And that would just take one simple thing away from me that I didn't have to worry about the next day. And then when he came home from work, he would take that off the line or out of the dryer and fold it and put it away. And I do acknowledge that dads have a lot of stuff going on too. Partners and dads have a lot in their own lives.
It's not a competition though.
It's not, no. But it's a two-way street with parenting.
Yeah.
And you still need that support.
Yeah. And what I often deal with in most of couples counseling is we can get really bogged down in like, this is me and what I'm feeling, that we forget to go, oh, that is you and what you're feeling.
Yep.
And so that crossover doesn't happen when both people are butting heads with like, I'm tired. Well, and I'm tired too. And it's like, when I say I'm tired, I'm not saying you're not. And that is the difference of that space that it needs to be in. And I also think when we were talking about having these conversations earlier on, is I think language is really important too. Language matters. So it's not you're helping me around the house, it's you're doing your part around the house.
Yes, absolutely.
Like little changes like that, I think is really important. And so pulling them up on it and calling them out. When it's like when people say that how dads babysit, and it's like,
I was thinking that.
Tell me a more enraging sentence than that. I
know, that is,
language matters. It's really important to pull that up and correct it in a still a kind way. But it's necessary changes that needs to happen. So how can we tell who is a good person to have around, who we're comfortable to see us in all of our glory and mess of, newborn days, who we can trust completely, whether it's holding the baby while we have a shower or whatever? I feel like there's a really particular kind of person we sometimes need in our life that kind of feels like us still, that we're so comfortable with.
Yes. So the things that you should consider are, who do I feel comfortable having my top off around?
Good point.
Sweating profusely around.
Smelling.
That's right. Bleeding. Like that's a big thing in the early days. And while you're really like feeling a bit out of your own body.
Yeah. Very vulnerable.
Because you might feel a bit irritable and not want certain people around. So if you think back to times when you've been triggered by a certain person or a group of people, or
when they're like draining.
And it takes more from you to be there, you don't want those people around. If you don't feel comfortable breastfeeding around someone or having unwanted advice given to you when you're vulnerable, you don't want that person there. If you don't feel comfortable asking them to take the washing off the line or out of the dryer and fold up your underwear, they're not the right person for you. If you've got like certain dietary requirements, for example, say you're a celiac and you know that this particular person or people don't respect your dietary wishes, or that you don't give your children sugar, for example, and that's a trigger for you, and then they always bring over sugar, you don't want those people around.
You don't need the added stress.
Correct. And it's not going to provide that positive, safe, calming space for you to feel held during your postpartum, which is
because you were kind of talking earlier about the importance of rest.
Yes.
So can you talk with us a bit more about that and how that looks? What does that mean?
Yeah. Okay. So when I talk about rest, I think about, pretty bluntly, we've had a baby, so we've got tissue scarring and tearing. We're bleeding, we're sweating, like I said before, but also our baby has come out of our body. There is a dinner plate sized wound like this on our uterus. If that wound was on the outside of our body, there is no way we would be doing those things that we do.
What a great way to put that.
Yeah. I learned that during my training to become a postpartum doula, and that has never left my mind.
Because it's invisible, because you can't see
right.
it.
Yep. And it doesn't hurt. Like if you had that on the outside, it would hurt to have that sort of wound, but it doesn't, because it's kind of mingled in with everything else.
I would also challenge that a bit, because how much pain are we so used to being in, even just from like period cycles?
Yes.
And I don't know if you've seen those videos where they put that machine on the men and they crumple when it's like level 2 or 3, and the women are like, I don't feel anything.
Yes, it's so funny.
I also wonder how much of that is going on actually with like our pain threshold to things.
Yeah, and we've got that adrenaline coursing through us at that time. So I request that women would be horizontal for as long as they possibly can during their postpartum.
Sounds great.
It does. I'm yet to succeed, but we put it out there and we plant the seed, so that if women know that that's an expectation from their care providers, it kind of like, not to give them any guilt, of course, but it kind of reminds them, okay, I'm sitting on the lounge, maybe I should lie on the lounge instead and put my feet up.
Right.
And it gives them that forced rest period.
Yeah, like to take it seriously.
That's right. And I'm not big on, I actually really despise the term sleep when the baby sleeps, as I'm sure many mothers in this day and age do. But resting can look like many different things. So you can just have a really long bath, or if you're a shower person, have like a really long restful shower with a podcast or some music playing in the background, put a hair mask in, do something that makes you feel really just calm and loved. Mare Botanicals is a company in Darwin which is run by a naturopath, Kate, and she created a beautiful range of postpartum products and birth products, and she's got a sit bath, which is like a postpartum bath, and it's beautiful. So if you can get your hands on some of that, that's a nice way to just take some time. And it's really nice to heal your scar tissue as well.
How cool is that?
So that's a nice one. And with the rest as well, we need to acknowledge that babies don't really sleep that well, and they certainly do not sleep in the rhythm that we're used to. So setting yourself up with those people that you feel comfortable with, having the conversations during pregnancy to ensure that when you get to those stages, it'll probably be the first 2 weeks you might be okay with that change in your sleep, and then after that it might hit you. You need to be able to have people that you can call on, whether it's your partner, family members, friends, whoever it is, a doula, to come be with the baby and your older children if possible, and just take some time to rest. Like eat a meal without a baby on you. How good's that? And
I was just thinking, because we also talk about the baby being the cause, if not that we're blaming, but of not sleep, but also your other children can be affected. My eldest started waking again when we had our baby, which was a really fun surprise to experience.
I'm sure.
So sometimes it can be other factors. And I was thinking rest can also be just not booking things in. Like not feeling like you have to, like, I feel so terrible that you lugged your pram and felt like you had to go out to like a cafe, because really it's like the answer is everyone come to the one with the baby.
But do you know what's bad about that? Is it was my own doing, because I met with a really good friend of mine, and her mother just so happened to be my midwife. And I was like, no, I want to see you guys outside of my home, because I've been in my home. You're
like so crazy.
So much. And they were like, oh, gee, it's not a good idea. And I'm like, no, I'll be fine. And then I was okay, but it was in Darwin. It was February. It was like 36 degrees and humidity that day, like ridiculous. And my son did so well, but I just remember getting home and going, "Ooh, that was a really big outing, and I shouldn't have done that."
It's hard, isn't it? It's kind of like that, like you don't really know. It's like hindsight. And
Yeah.
because we were talking earlier about like not having visitors for like a week or 2 weeks, I think something you said. And
Yeah.
I remember that excitement when I had my first, because you're so excited. You want to involve people and share your story. And I shouldn't say you want to, not everyone feels the same way, but I know I felt that, like I really wanted to be doing things.
Yeah.
And I think that's just part of, like, I had no idea what I was in for. Like I really just had no expectation. And I think it's helpful if you have people around you to kind of not tell you what to do, but to share what they went through.
Yeah.
As a way of them trying to gently be like, this is what I experienced and what I noticed. And that might be, like you were saying before, like planting a seed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very gently. Because we know too that pregnant women, our emotions are really heightened during pregnancy, and we can take great offense to something, even if it's, you know, so we need to be really careful and very mindful of those hormones and early postpartum, because it's the same.
Yeah. And the way that you're treating them and speaking to them still needs to be very much respectful and autonomous.
Yeah. Definitely. It's a very big topic.
Yeah. So do you have any final tips or advice for people, maybe around like gifts? Because I know sometimes it can be a really popular thing for people to have like baby showers and receive gifts. So do you have any other bits of advice around that, of how that can be used in a way for postpartum care and support?
Yeah, so instead of a baby shower, I would suggest putting the idea out there of like a fill your freezer party. And you can still do all the things, have a photographer if you wish, you know, have the big beautiful banner celebrating your pending arrival, but you have the women in your life that you love and trust and that want to nourish you in many different ways. Come spend a day in your kitchen, fill your freezer,
make cool snacks. Is that?
Yeah, and I think it's just, and they'll still naturally bring you gifts as well, I think, but it's for them to be able to do that for you and for you not to have to worry postpartum. Another even better thing that they can do is take the meals home with them, put them in their freezer, and then just do a meal drop to you.
Yeah.
Because who has...
If you don't have space.
That's right. Not many people have a chest freezer. If you buy one during your pregnancy, love that for you. Like, that's so good. If you can find one. But yeah, get them to do that, and that will be so helpful. You can register for services as well. So I think a lot of people, again, it's not really a space where there's a lot for us to be able to access in terms of registries that aren't baby shops. So in America, I know there's a big platform where women can go and like register for any service that they want to use postpartum. So I'd love to see that in Australia.
Yeah, I was just thinking, how would you do that? And the only thing I can think of is give everyone your PayPal link. And they can put money in your account that way or something.
Something like that. And reach out again to your providers and see, like, if there's people that you want to work with. I had a lady contact me the other day and ask about, I have a doula for a day session, and I suggest on my website that people can purchase that as a baby shower gift.
Oh, cool.
So I had a lady inquire for her friend who's currently pregnant, and like doing those little things for your girlfriends who are pregnant is really lovely. It will mean the world to them. So yeah, I know there's a lot out there. There's a lot of providers that would definitely go above and beyond to provide that service to their clients. Again, we don't always advertise it, but please reach out to anyone that you would love to have in your postpartum space and just ask the question.
Because also if they don't offer it, it can also be that spark of, hey, this is a great idea and I should be offering this, or maybe I could find a way to offer this. So
yeah. And please, if you have a pregnant lady in your life, please do not buy her mittens. Never buy mittens. Yeah. Did you not receive mittens as a gift?
You mean for me or the baby?
The baby. The amount of women that I know who received, like, I received about 8 packets of mittens and beanies. I lived in Darwin.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I never once used any beanie or any mittens for the kids. I think I only maybe put something on their hand when they were scratching me. when they went through that stage.
Yes,
but really, and even then, really, that was like, I didn't really do much for that. I totally forgot about the copious amounts of beanies and stuff.
Yes.
Depends on your climate and where you live, but like certainly for most of us in Australia. Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you can give people a gift voucher for a grocery store, an Uber Eats voucher, do the meal train, buy them a service, get them a cleaner. Oh, heaven. Like that would be so good. A dog walker voucher, offer to come and take their older children to the park and for lunch, you know, very thoughtful gifts that don't take a lot of effort on your behalf, depending on how old the older children are. And it will mean the world to the new family.
Yeah, so much more impactful and support in a way that is very unique, and I'm sure that they'll always remember. Yes,
definitely. They'll feel very loved and held during that time, and that's so important.
Thank you so much, Dee, for sharing your wealth of knowledge. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that it's given everyone something to think about, whether you're thinking of having a baby or another baby, or if you're currently pregnant. I hope you're able to take a lot away from this conversation. So before we head off, can you tell people a bit more about where they can find you?
Yes. So you can mostly find me on Instagram at Mama Nourished Co, and at mamanourishedco.com, which is my website. I mostly share on Instagram just because it's, you know, it's a fun platform to be on. But I am on Facebook too at just Mama Nourished. But hopefully people get some good info on there.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'll make sure to have all that linked down in the show notes as well.
Thank you so much.